and you have a business and you've invested in another business and you work and your wife has a side hustle, you list down all of the incomes and see where your income is coming from so that you have an idea of what cash flow is going to look like. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what the books are all about. You can draw so much information out of a good set of books. It's GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Put in quality information, have a good set of books, or the equivalent. For example, the software you're talking about is in its full way a set of books. And what measure excites you? I have bar graphs, and they're color-coded, and I don't like to see red. Red makes me very sad. I don't like the color. It irritates me. And green makes me very happy. And when I hit my goals, the bar goes green. I actually track by the day how much, for example, we're billing. And also, of course, on the financial type statements, net worth, net income, etc. Figure out what's both accurate, useful, but also satisfying. That triggers the little dopamine gland, wherever the heck that thing is in the back of your head, and gives you that little rush when you see it. And those types of measures will help you immensely.
So I think that was incredibly important. And so the first thing is accurate. What was the second thing?
Useful. Sometimes we track things that it turns out are not that useful.
And then the last one was satisfying?
Satisfying, yeah. Where's the dopamine rush?
I think that is awesome. I love that. And I'm going to steal that for sure. And I just want to be clear, you're not billing me for this, right?
No, lamentably not.
So hopefully we're not creating any red for you. The next thing I wanted to speak about is the power of diversification. I especially think this is important when you deal with small business owners, and even more especially, is that good English, John? It may not be. For real estate investors, I don't believe you should have large concentrations in wealth in one place that you subject yourself to the risk of getting what I say is like blown up. I think you ought to be diversified. Often financial planners in the investment realm, you talk about being diversified, where you have small cap stocks, large cap stocks, international stocks, combined with some bonds, you're diversified. And I believe in that as well. That's super important. But I also believe that you could combine that traditional investing, stocks and bonds, with real estate, small business ownership, money in the bank, other assets that you can build to create diversification. For me, as an example, I have 3 prongs to my wealth building. I have the value in my business, my practice as a small business owner myself. I want to drive the value of my business higher. I want it to be more profitable, generate revenues, and also be marketable, that if I ever wanted or needed to sell it, it could be sold and would be valuable to somebody else. I also have my investment portfolio of traditional stocks and bonds, 401ks, IRAs, 529 plan college funds, money in the bank. That's the second component. And then the last component is a portfolio of real estate. I have residential real estate as well as commercial real estate. Now, that doesn't need to be the formula for everyone, but I'm a big believer in diversified, because sometimes my real estate may not be performing up to par, but then I have the other pieces of the puzzle that might be doing perfectly well, and they're likely to change positions over time. What is your thoughts about diversification?
I have a different bias. My personal bias, and I've paid for it, but I've also benefited from it. I diversify less in the traditional sense when I feel comfortable that I'm very, very good at a few things, in which case I tend to focus my strength on those very, very few things I'm good at. Now, I suppose I diversify some in the sense of, for example, almost all my investment is in real estate. I do very little in the markets and so on.
Okay.
There is some diversification, however, within the real estate, and given that some of it's free and clear, I can lose some rent, but I probably won't go to zero. So that's diversification of risk in a way.
Absolutely.
But I'm just so comfortable with real estate.
By not having debt, and when something bad happens, it's much easier to absorb shocks or interruptions in income when you don't have debt service.
So I guess without it being technically diversification, it's still, how about this? Part of my posture is defensive, so that when things don't go as planned, sure, I'm able to take the hit.
So you have a larger concentration of real estate than what I'm talking about, but you feel comfortable because you've mitigated your risk, which is what diversification is meant to do, by having lots of your real estate debt-free, meaning that you could withstand things better than somebody that's leveraged, especially highly leveraged. Is that a good description?
Yeah, and add to it, why did I become a tax lawyer? A lot of reasons. One of them is I didn't figure government would get any smaller, much as I would like it to. And so I also feel very safe that, I can make enough, especially if my debt's low, I can make enough to feed myself working an hour a day.
Very good. So you're definitely living within your means, even though I would hope that you're having a blessed life that's very fulfilling and enjoyable, and you're not going to be scrounging in the trash heap for your lunch today.
Let me go slightly off tangent.
Yeah.
One of the things we end up talking to clients about a lot when we get into the why, and things come out, you'd be surprised at some of the things that come out. A sense of gratitude is so useful and keeps me so centered and balanced. I don't want to die tomorrow, but if I did what I was supposed to do. I brought up some great kids. I've lived in the golden age of man, and yeah, we got issues. Humans always have had issues, and certainly some of the political stuff is very disheartening. But people have been through way worse, way worse. We live in a golden age, and I'm so thankful for it. I'm not poking the dirt with a stick, hoping that 8 of us can feed 7, and then the king comes and takes the other 1/8 or more. It's pretty good, and I'm happy about that.
I think that's beautifully said, and it ties into money, because if you do pursue, like, I'm always going to want more and I'm never going to be satisfied, when you're thinking about things in terms of competition and the alpha male or the A personality, that's all well and good, but to a certain point that is destructive. And being satisfied and at peace and content, especially when most people, especially Americans, have so many blessings in their lives, I think that it is a tangent because it's not specifically about building wealth, but it's a great life philosophy. So thanks so much for sharing that. Hey, I have one more. I appreciate you hanging with me. The last of my wealth building rules is be careful with debt. And so usually I set this up when I speak with folks, John, is that to me there's like 2 different ends of the spectrum. On one hand, you have Dave Ramsey, the author of The Total Money Makeover, wildly successful book. Dave Ramsey also has one of the most successful podcasts out there, huge community, very successful man, and the company he runs, and he is a no-debt guy. He would actually counsel to you that, don't get a mortgage. You could save up money, although he's okay with a 15-year mortgage. But he basically does not want you to borrow money to go to college. No borrowing, even for small business owners. Very dogmatic, no debt. On the other end of the spectrum, another popular book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I think is a great book, Robert Kiyosaki, he is very liberal in his advice about using debt in an effort to build wealth. He does divide it between good debt and bad debt, but he doesn't seem very discriminating about using debt to accumulate assets. And in my mind, those are 2 bookends. And I come, John, in between those 2. I'm not as dogmatic as Dave Ramsey. I think sometimes it makes sense to borrow money. I think you need to be sober about it and careful. You don't want to blow yourself up. I've used debt effectively in building wealth. Sometimes it hasn't worked out, though, so I could see the dangers in it. But I also find Robert Kiyosaki's worldview about you're buying real estate, don't worry about leveraging it. Just, have loans, and then if the property goes up, you refinance out and buy more properties. I don't find that satisfying either, and that seems too dangerous, especially over the long term. So, in summary, I'm okay with using debt, but I divide it into good debt and bad debt. If you're using debt to acquire assets, that's good. Bad debt, credit cards, student loans, car loans, especially big car loans where you're overbuying car based on your income and assets. Those are all impediments to building wealth. But you definitely, again, want to be careful with the use of debt because it's a dangerous tool and you don't want to blow yourself up. What are your thoughts on debt, especially because you deal with so many real estate investors and often you're using leverage with the buying and selling of properties?
All right, couple thoughts. Washington said of fire and of government, was it fire? He said it's a useful thing but a fearful master, something along those lines. That's okay. Debt. The debt reflects who and what you are. Now, I'm more in the Kiyosaki camp, but with the caveats of don't get sloppy. Here's the thing. I believe in taking advantage of human stupidity, and there's an awful lot of it. On the governmental level, the Soviets failed by trying to have a planned economy and putting a price on everything because they figured they could do it better than, free people. We've done that with money, which is everything. Money can buy almost everything. By putting a price on money artificially, we are regulating. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, we're actually in an anomaly of we're starting to head for negative interest rates. I don't even think that was possible before electronic money. So what's my point? Debt right now is artificially cheap. So I am more prone to using it and taking advantage of it with the caveat that I better have a fairly conservative income ratio. So the assets I acquire, I don't like using debt to sit on something on the theory that it's going to appreciate. I don't like that at all because now you got to eat the payments, and you may eat them for a lot longer than you would like. But in terms of an income-producing asset that can easily cover the debt, which given how cheap debt is now, that's not as hard to do. Granted, it's a spiral effect because it drives up the price of the assets, and it's getting harder to find reasonably priced assets. If it's a reasonable coverage ratio, given how artificially cheap debt is, I'm in favor of using it. I totally agree that it should not be used for personal stuff. Then you're living the American flaw, the American fantasy of buying luxury today, paying for it later. Well, we're getting ready to pay for it, and I don't think it's going to be very pretty. So I think I'm with Kiyosaki. I like the idea of good debt and bad debt. I think good debt is covered by an income-producing asset, conservatively so.
Would you counsel most people most of the time, I'm sure there's exceptions to any guideline, that if they owned a property that had debt on it, to refinance the debt, to cash out, to buy other properties? Because that's the kind of thing I could see where in special circumstances, unique opportunities, that might be pretty good, and I've met people that have done that strategy very successfully. But that's not something I think that I would participate in, except in extreme circumstances. What do you think about that?
Depends on the quality of the asset. It depends on the quality of the asset that you're acquiring with the refi. It is very tax efficient to raise cash in that manner and live off of it. The problem with that is it becomes very tempting to cash out too much and not have conservative ratios that you can absorb a hit.
Right.
So I love the idea of free and clear or low debt properties with a line of credit on them, so that when a really nice deal appears, bam, you can jump on it.
Beautiful.
I like that quite a lot, but with discretion.
Hey, on the consumer debt side with car loans, I saw this statistic, which I think is alarming, and it shows why people like you and I are so valuable in the marketplace, because people make a lot of mistakes with money and miss a lot of opportunities, and they don't win with money as consistently as they should. What do you think the average car payment is in the country?
My gut feel would be $550.
Yeah, it's a little less. It's just under $500. But that's gone up a little bit over time. But the bigger thing is that the average length of the loans is going higher. So you see more in 5 and 6 year loans, which is not a good use of debt instruments. I think we could agree on that. That's bad borrowing.
It's people living beyond their means. It's the American way. Our government does it. We do it. There's going to be a price